Welcome back to our leadership series. In this video, we are continuing our discussion on emotional intelligence in leadership. In part 1, we looked at what emotional intelligence really means in leadership. We explored the 4 essential components of emotional intelligence identified by Daniel Goleman and also looked at how these skills can make a real difference in leadership through the example of Mr. Vineet Nair. But understanding these 4 components is only the beginning. But the real question is, how do we actually develop these skills in our day-to-day lives as leaders? Because emotional intelligence is not something that we simply understand once and then master. It is a skill that develops through conscious practice, reflection, and consistent effort. So, in this part, let's move from understanding emotional intelligence to developing it. And we'll take each of these 4 components and look at some simple, practical habits that leaders can intentionally practice. The first pillar is self-awareness, which we have discussed in detail in one of our previous videos. We have provided the link to that video in the description below. Do check it out for a better understanding of self-awareness and its role in emotional intelligence. Now, let's move on to the second component, self-management. So, how can leaders develop better self-management? Based on research, there are several habits leaders can intentionally practice to develop self-management. Start by regulating your immediate emotional reactions through techniques like deep breathing, pausing, or grounding yourself before responding. Grounding. It's a simple technique that helps you bring your attention back to the present moment when you feel overwhelmed, anxious, stressed, or emotionally upset. Example: if someone is feeling anxious before a presentation, they can just notice 5 things they can see, touch 4 things around them, listen for 3 sounds, identify 2 smells, notice 1 thing they can taste. This shifts the brain's attention away from anxious thoughts and just bring them back to the present. Next, prepare yourself mentally by using positive self-talk, focusing on what you can control and reflecting on challenging situations to learn from them. Positive self-talk is one of the simplest yet most powerful emotional intelligence skills a leader can develop. The way you speak to yourself influences how you respond to challenges, pressure, and people. Here are a few practical ways to build positive self-talk at work. First, notice your inner dialogue. When something goes wrong, pay attention to what you're telling yourself instead of saying, "I'm a failure." Ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience? Second, replace self-critics with constructive language. Instead of, "I can't handle this," say, "This is challenging, but I can figure it out one step at a time." This does not ignore reality. It helps you respond more effectively. Third, speak to yourself the way you would speak to a valued team member. As leaders, we are often kind and encouraging to others, but overly critical of our own selves. Offer yourself the same understanding and encouragement you would give your team. That's self-compassion. Fourth, pause before reacting under pressure. Take a deep breath and remind yourself, stay calm, listen first, respond thoughtfully. This brief pause can prevent emotional reactions and lead to better decisions. Finally, end each day by acknowledging one thing you did well. Leadership isn't about being perfect, it's about learning and growing. Recognizing small wins builds confidence and resilience over time. Finally, support your emotional well-being by staying accountable to your goals, considering other people's perspectives, and making time to recharge through healthy habits such as exercise, adequate sleep, or mindfulness. These may sound like simple habits, but their impact becomes much clearer when we see what self-management looks like in a real workplace situation. Now let's look at self-management in action. A project manager receives an email from an unhappy client criticizing months of work and demanding immediate changes. Feeling frustrated is natural response, but instead of replying immediately, the manager takes a few deep breaths, steps away from the computer for a few minutes, and rereads the email with a clear mind. Rather than focusing on the criticism, now the manager focuses on understanding the client's concerns and prepare a calm, solution-oriented response. By managing their emotions first, they prevent the situation from escalating and help maintain a positive relationship with the client. And that brings us to the next component of emotional intelligence, which is social awareness. Researchers have identified several practical habits that help leaders strengthen social awareness over time. First, pay attention to subtle emotional cues, such as changes in facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, or behavior. Next, learn to read the broader social environment by understanding team dynamics, communication styles, and the emotional climate of the workspace. Number 3, ask for feedback to understand whether others perceive you as approachable, attentive, and socially aware. Now let's see how social awareness works in practice. A department head is introducing a new work process during a team meet. As they speak, everyone nods in agreement, but the room feels unusually quiet. A few employees avoid eye contact, some appear distracted, and no one asks questions. Instead of assuming that silence means agreement, the leader notices those subtle cues and pauses the meeting, and he asks, "I notice everyone is quieter than usual. I would rather like to hear your thoughts. Is there anything about this change that's concerning you?" Gradually, team members begin sharing their concerns about workload and unrealistic timelines. By recognizing the social and emotional climate of the room rather than simply listening to words, the leader addresses the concerns early and gains genuine support for the change. Here again, we can see that emotional intelligence is not just about identifying emotions, it is about using that awareness to respond effectively. And that naturally takes us to the fourth and final component, relationship management. Based on research, there are several habits leaders can intentionally practice to develop relationship management. Number 1, build trust by communicating openly, keeping your promises, and being consistent in your actions. Next, practice empathy by acknowledging people's emotions, listening without judgment, and creating opportunities for honest conversations. And finally, don't avoid difficult conversations. Address conflicts early, look for common grounds, and work collaboratively towards solutions. Now let's look at an example. A team leader notices that an employee has missed two important project deadlines. Rather than discussing the issue publicly or making assumptions about the employee's commitment, the leader arranges a private conversation. They begin by saying, "I have noticed that the last two deadlines were missed, and I would like to understand what's been happening." As the conversation progresses, the employee explains that they are struggling to balance an increased workload after taking on additional responsibilities. The leader listens carefully, acknowledges the employee's concerns, and works with them to adjust priorities and set realistic expectations. By addressing the issue early, showing empathy, and focusing on solutions instead of blame, the leader strengthens trust while improving performance. And that brings us to the end of the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence in leadership. We've looked at how self-awareness helps leaders recognize and understand their own emotions, strengths, weaknesses. We've also looked at how leaders can develop self-management by regulating their reactions and managing their inner dialogue. We've seen how social awareness helps leaders recognize the emotions, concerns, and dynamics within their teams. And we've explored how relationship management helps leaders build trust, communicate with empathy, and handle difficult conversations effectively. The important thing to remember is that emotional intelligence is not about never feeling angry, stressed, disappointed, or frustrated. It is about becoming more aware of what you're feeling, understanding how those emotions influence your behavior, and choosing how you respond. And just like any other leadership skill, emotional intelligence improves with practice. So, don't try to develop all these skills overnight. Start with one small habit. Pause before reacting. Listen a little more carefully. Notice the emotional climate around you. Have that difficult conversation instead of avoiding it. Because when leaders learn to manage themselves better, understand others better, and build stronger relationships, they don't just become emotionally intelligent leaders, they become more effective leaders. And that is the real power of emotional intelligence in leadership. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more content from our leadership series. We'd also love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, questions, or topics you'd like us to cover in the comments below. Have a wonderful day.